The Tallarico Group has helped CEOs grow their sales and their leaders for over a decade. Founder Bill Tallarico brings you Total Growth, a podcast that explores the challenges of selling, leading, and building great relationships.
Welcome back to Total Growth. My name is Bill Tallarico. I'm by myself today, which is a little unusual. We've been having guests for the past couple months here on Total Growth, and I wanted to take some time and talk about prospecting. I think it's one of those topics that's important to everybody, but sometimes overlooked. And then oftentimes the debate rages on about, how do we prospect? Can you prospect in this new era, in this new age of social media? And, is the phone dead and voicemail dead? And, I don't know if it's dead. I certainly, I don't think it's best years are ahead of us and using the phone to prospect, but I certainly don't think it's dead. So I want to talk a little bit today about phone use, how we use the phone in prospecting for new business and reaching out to those who we're currently working with, our theory on how emails and voicemails go together, and then we'll talk a little bit about what happens if people actually pick up the phone, which is that dreaded concern. We always prep for the voicemail, but what happens if they actually pick up the phone and we have to say hello to them? And then how do we network? I think that's one of the questions I get most is, how do I effectively network? And people think networking only happens at the big events where we go to, where other business leaders are going to be gathered, or award ceremonies. And I think we can always be networking. I think that when done right, networking doesn't feel like it's slimy or doesn't feel cheesy. Network is just making new friends and acquaintances and continuing to grow our circle of influence. So that's what I want to focus on today. And I can tell you, when it comes to the phone, as I said earlier, I don't think the phone's dead. In fact, I think the phone's a great tool. We find the phone to be a very powerful way to actually build your personal brand, right? And when we make phone calls, and if we're leaving voicemails for people, it becomes very important for us to take that voicemail with importance versus just rushing through a script, because somebody's going to listen to that. And when they listen to that, they start to get a sense for who we are. And that sense of who we are comes a lot from our tone, our energy level, our excitement. And the better we leave voicemails for people, the more impassioned we leave voicemails for people and let our true self come through for them, the more they start to feel like they know us. And we know that if we're going to be prospecting using the phone, that we're never, it's very unlikely for us to get somebody on the first try. They pick up the phone. We have, this wicked script we go through and they love it. And like, man, I can't wait to buy from you. That very rarely, if ever, happens, right? More often than not, we're going to be leaving voicemails. And when we leave voicemails with consistency over time, people start to feel like they know you. And I have a lot of folks that talk to me and they're like, oh, I have my reps call, and if they get voicemail, they hang up, and they'll try back a couple hours later, and then we make them hang up again if they get voicemail. And after 4 or 5 tries, we might let them leave a voicemail. I'm not telling you that's silly, but I just want to remind you that people also have caller ID. So when we're calling somebody 6 or 7 times in a day, and you see that in your list of calls and nobody leaves a voicemail for you, I don't know how you feel, but that drives me crazy. So, when I look at that list of that number that's called me 6 or 7 times and doesn't leave a voicemail for me, if I eventually pick up just to see what's going on, and they're like, hey, Bill, how you doing? And they go down this salesy pitch, I'm done. I'm just so instantly turned off. So don't put yourself behind the proverbial 8 ball. Give yourself an advantage. If you get voicemail, leave a message, make it compelling, make it short, make it enthusiastic. If you have to stand up to get energy, great, versus sitting down and letting that energy level wane, especially if you're doing an hour of calls or 30 minutes of calls where you're making calls over and over. Stand up, give yourself a platform to be excited and project your energy and your voice. But make that voicemail short, sweet, and let them know an email's coming. right? And then we love having emails connected to voicemails. We always say they go out 2 by 2, right? There's a little biblical nature to that, where when you're going out 2 by 2 with a voicemail and an email, I love leaving my voicemails, wrapping them up by saying, hey, Evan, I'll send you an email to follow up as well. That might be easier for you to get back to me with. And send the email and say, hey, Evan, left you a voicemail earlier today. Looking for some time to catch up and discuss blah. And when we do that, it also starts to build trust. Because remember, the definition of trust we love to use is trust is when our words and actions are consistent over time. So if I tell you that I'm sending you an email and then I actually follow up and do it, I'm starting to subconsciously build that trust with you. So remember, emails and voicemails go out 2 by 2. They're very impactful for each other because it gives some the intended prospect or the person with whom we're communicating, it gives them flexibility, and it also is letting them know that what's easiest method for them to reply to us is important to us. So if they decide they want to call us back, wonderful, we're ready. If they decide they'd like to reply with an email, even better sometimes, because then we could schedule time to talk. So emails, voicemails, 2 by 2, keep them consistent, and that's over time, because people often will also ask, well, if I leave a voicemail on Monday and I send out the email, and I leave a voicemail on Wednesday, should I still send out another email? And the answer is absolutely yes, because what you'll find either way, with its voicemails or emails, if somebody hasn't responded to that message in 48 hours, they're probably not going to respond, right? It's just the nature, the speed of information at which it comes at us these days. The velocity of information is just so rapid that most people don't have great systems for responding to emails and responding to voicemails. So if they don't get back to you inside of 48 hours, they're probably not getting back to you. It's great to go back again with another message. And that can continue on over time. Now, after the third message, or I'd say the third message, you might want to expand that window a little bit and go from 48 hours to 72 hours. But just keep that consistency, because we know that it could take us 8 times or more of reaching out and touching somebody to get them to actually respond to us. So there has to be that consistency of messaging with our prospecting. And then what happens if somebody actually picks up the phone, right? Well, that could be dangerous if you're not prepared. And I'm not a big fan of scripting. And what I mean by that is I'm not a big fan of rigorous scripting, just because it doesn't work for me. I can't do it well enough. There's some people that excel at it, and they love their script. They own their script, and they can deliver it every time like it's fresh and new and it doesn't sound redundant. If that's you, great. Go for a script. Absolutely go for the script. If you're like me and you have to be a little more in the moment, a little more casual, a little more yourself and unscripted, then do that, but have a framework, a wireframe for the things you need to say. And I'll oftentimes, if I'm making calls, I'll start out with my loose script, which is just that opening intro, working with folks like you on blank, and the question of how are you managing that today? Remember, if somebody picks up the phone, it's their time. So I'm a big fan of being courteous and kind and not being manipulative. And the most courteous thing I think we can do when we catch somebody on the phone that first time or any time is asking them if we're catching them at a bad time. Virtually every call I make outbound to a client, a prospect, or whomever is, hey, am I catching you at a bad time? And the response you'll get to that, first of all, it puts the hearer at ease and lets them know that we're not just going to turn the fire hose on them and pump out as much information as we can. So I love to say, hey, am I catching you at a bad time? And if they say, no, I got a couple minutes, great. What did they tell you? I have a couple minutes. So let's respect that and say, well, I appreciate that. I was calling to ask you about blank and how you might be dealing with that today. And they'll start to share information with you, or they'll back you up and tell you they're not comfortable talking about that. Either way, we're good because we're in the moment, right? We make that quick announcement of who we are, wondering if I'm catching you at a bad time, calling because we're working with organizations that look like yours on growing sales or on their ad campaigns or whatever your service or product is, and asking them how they're dealing with that today. And then we're into the conversation because that's where we ultimately want to be. We just want to get into that conversation as quickly as possible. So be direct, be kind, be courteous, respect their time. And what we find when we ask the question of, am I catching you at a bad time? Someone might say to you, actually, Bill, it's a bad time. I'm getting ready to walk into a meeting and I thought you were someone else. We have an opportunity to respect that. And instead of throwing up whatever it is we were hoping to talk to them about, say, great, when's a better time for us to connect? And they might say, Wednesdays usually work good for me. Wednesday morning's wide open. Thank you so much. I'm going to shoot you a quick note and for Wednesday at 10 a.m. and we could jump on the phone together. We have a clear next step set. At that moment, we actually have a scheduled call with somebody that 100% of the times they're not going to show up for it. But even if it's 50% of the time, and I will tell you the percentages are a lot higher, even if it's only 50% of the time that they show up for that call, we're far ahead of the game, right? We are far ahead of sitting there making how many more phone calls to get into that meaningful discussion. So please remember, a great way to start that call is with the, am I catching you at a bad time? And then actually listen to the answer, right? Well, what happens if someone else picks up the phone when we're prospecting? So we have our intended target. We call Larry. Larry doesn't answer, but someone else does, who's either his admin, receptionist, whoever it might be. And we're trying to get through to Larry. I love treating gatekeepers. I hate that term because it seems like such a bad title and objectifies the people that do this good work. But, for lack of a better term, gatekeeper. Whenever we catch a gatekeeper, I love treating them like they're part of the process because they are. And I love extending dignity and respect to them because it comes back in droves for us. So rather than just trying to rush by them and say, hey, I need to talk to Larry, and when they say, okay, can I ask who's calling? Don't use the manipulation and the fake tactics of, don't worry, he'll want to take my call, or my name's Bill, just let him know I'm calling, he needs to talk to me. That puts us in a position of starting a relationship in a negative place versus trying to start us in a very positive, productive place. So if you do say, don't worry, he needs to talk to me, or he'll want to take this call, when you finally get through to him, and if he picks up the phone and you tell him who you are, if that was coming my way, I'd be like, yeah, look, I'm done, and just move on. And we don't need to play those games. We want to build real relationships, not start out with on false premise. So be kind and honest. And the most important thing we can say to a gatekeeper that actually gets us through to the individual we're hoping to connect with is, I was hoping you could help me. And when we ask for help and we say, hoping you could help me, I'm trying to reach Larry about blank. I've never talked to him before, and I'm hoping we can connect. People usually are kind back and are willing to help you. So we love asking for help. We love saying, hoping you could help me. Here's what I'm trying to do. And usually somebody will extend that offer of help back to you. So treat people like people. It usually pays off, right? One other thing I often end up talking about with clients and people that aren't in sales for a living is, how do they network? So this is often a problem with professional service providers or professionals that are looking to expand their network, their referral sources, their centers of influence. How do we grow these relationships that ultimately allow us to grow our business? Well, this is something that's always come fairly natural for me because I have no fear of talking, right? So I have no fear of connecting with people, probably to a fault. I embarrass my kids virtually every time I'm out in public with them. And that's not like almost every time. No, that's virtually every time I walk out of the door with one of my children, I embarrass them because I'll talk to the cashier at Dick's Sporting Goods. I'll walk through the parking lot in a mall and see someone wearing a Duquesne University sweatshirt. This just happened to us yesterday. And I'll yell over, "Hey, Duquesne, you go there?" And the girl looked at me the other day in horror and she's like, "No, I just got a free sweatshirt." I'm like, "Okay, I went there. I just thought you might have had this. We might have had that in common." And my son hangs his head, shakes his head, gets in the car and is like, "Really? Do you need to speak to everybody you see?" And yeah, the answer is I do. It's kind of a reflex. But for those who are less comfortable connecting with others and having a way to get into a meaningful conversation, and then getting into a meaningful conversation about business, whether it's at the kids' soccer game, whether it's at a networking event, wherever we might be, as professionals, that's ultimately where we want to go, right? We want to get into a professional conversation with somebody that, and I know that in most cases, we want to go up and tell them what we do and ask them who they know we can help. We can't do that because that's too disingenuous and it puts us ahead of them. And we never want to do that. We always want to put the other ahead of us. We put the other's needs ahead of ours, and we find then that our needs get met. So the way I like to approach networking when it's someone new or in a setting that we want to drive the conversation towards business, and this could be with somebody we know and have never had the business conversation, or someone new and we want to get around to understanding, is make the conversation about them. So rather than leading with what we do, let's lead with interest in what they do. And that would sound something like this. Would be like, "Hey, Larry, tell me about your business." And Larry's going to tell you what he does because essentially what we're asking him is, "Tell me, what do you do for a living?" But when I say, "Tell me about your business," it's that invitation to conversation that lets him start to tell me about what do they really do versus him just saying, "I'm a contractor." He has an opportunity to tell you, "Well, I specialize in home remodeling with an emphasis on kitchens," or whatever it might be. And that example is relatively fresh to me because we're interviewing contractors right now for a kitchen remodel. But when you say to somebody, "Tell me about your business," they will. Then after they share that information with you, I like to ask people, "What's a good client look like for you?" So you do blah, you do blank. What's a good client look like for you? And they'll start to tell us, "Well, we like to work with people that have this type of profile," or especially in the wealth management space or in the software space, they'll tell you what a good business or a good individual looks like for them. And then one thing I like to ask, if it hasn't already been answered, is what should I listen for that makes me think of you? Right? When somebody's telling me about what they're working on, what's that? What are some of those keywords I should be listening for that make me think of you? That's your way of asking them what makes you unique. And someone will share that with you. And what happens next is, I don't know if it's very predictable, but it's certainly understandable. And once we go through this discussion with somebody, where we take that interest in asking them about their business and learning about them, people usually will look at you and say, "Hey, Bill, tell me about your business. And what's a good client look like for you? And what makes you unique, and what should we be listening for that makes us think of you?" And you have an opportunity to then share all that information with them. And you have an opportunity to share more information with them now than if you tried pushing it early in the conversation, simply because they're now interested. You demonstrated you cared. Now they're demonstrating back to you that they care and they're interested. So if you apply that approach to putting the other first and taking a little bit of an interest in their business and their needs, you're going to find that prospecting goes much easier for you and becomes much more natural for you. And I think you're going to have much better results as a result of putting the other first. This comes back to one of our core principles, which I'd like to remind you of now, and that is, we must always remember sales is something we do for somebody, not to somebody. So when we come into these conversations, and I love the phrase "coming in hot." When we come in hot and it's all about us and we're pushing, people repel, right? People tend to pull back from that. But when we come in and we lean into people, and we take an interest in others, and we take an interest in their business, when we take an interest in their needs and helping them find solutions, we can't help but be successful, guys. So hopefully this helps you as you start to prospect a little bit today, and hopefully this helps you when you're at your next event and you want to meet somebody and start to build some relationship with them. Be genuine, be authentic, be intentional, be yourself. Thank you all for your time. God bless. Best of luck.